Hi there, welcome to this video on how to edit photographs. So I've had quite a few requests recently asking me to do a video on how I edit photographs. And so what I'm going to do in this video is talk you through some of the edits I've done on recent photographs that I took while I was in Italy. So I'm going to do some low light enhancements. I'm going to do some HDR enhancements. I did quite a bit of cutting and cropping and reframing some pictures. So I'm going to talk about that. Hopefully there should be something in this video that you'll find useful. And I know that'll really help you to enjoy your photography. I'm going to be covering quite a few techniques in this first section. I'm going to be using a photo that was taken in fairly low lighting conditions, so I'm going to enhance that using Camera Raw. Then when I get the photograph into Photoshop, I'm going to do a little bit of recomposition. I'll talk to you about that when I get into Photoshop, and then I'll show you how I enhance the photograph using Luminar NEO. So this is a photograph here that's in Bridge at the moment. So I'll launch that into Camera Raw. When it gets into Camera Raw, there's several things that I need to do with it. Now, a key thing when you are doing landscape photography, especially on the coast, is to make sure that the horizon is level. And in this photograph, the horizon is a little bit wonky and it's fairly obvious because of the sea. Now, that's quite easy to do. You can either do it by eye, or there is a tool just here that you can click on and use the horizon. So you stretch that tool across the horizon and it levels up the photograph and it makes it so much better. It feels like the water's running out of the picture if it's not level. So that's the first job to do. And then we'll just apply that crop. Now the horizon is completely level. The next thing we want to do is we want to change the exposure. Now I'm not going to do lots in Camera Raw because I can do more edits when I get into Luminar NEO at the end. So at the moment, all I'm going to do is correct the exposure. So at this point, the sky is very bright. So if I take down the highlights, that removes quite a lot of the problem there of the sky being too bright, but also the foreground is too dark. So if I bring up the shadows, I get back lots of detail in the foreground, but it's still not quite bright enough just yet. So what I need to do is I need to apply a layer mask, and what I'm going to do is use a linear gradient so it's nice and soft, and then I'm going to raise the exposure to a point that looks natural. And I'm not going to go too far. I'm going to maybe just take that a little bit higher because it's just catching the building, and then I'm happy with that. And I'll open that into Photoshop. We've opened that photograph into Photoshop, but I'm not massively happy with the composition at the moment. Down here on the right hand side is a little bit of a balcony that's distracting. We don't need that. And then we've got a lot of very empty water, and we've got a boat on the left hand side that I would really love to be in this position just here, and then I can crop the whole thing to be far more square. So we're going to move the boat. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a rectangular marquee tool and just make a very rough selection around that boat, and then I'm going to use Control-C and then Control-V to paste that boat onto a new layer, and you can see it appear just here on the right hand side. Then I'm going to move the boat into a position where I would prefer it to be. So about there. So when I actually crop in, it's going to look something like this. So that will be in a fairly good position. So let's actually apply that crop now. Then I can make sure that that boat is in exactly the right position. When I'm looking at the crop, I'm just keeping my eye on this cloud here. I wouldn't really want to crop that cloud in half because it's there. I either want to get rid of it completely or leave it in. So I'm gonna leave that in because I quite like that little bit of cloud. Then I'm going to apply that crop. But now you can see obviously that boat doesn't look very good. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a levels correction. And I'm just going to make sure it only applies to the boat that I've just cut out. So I can click this button here to clip that adjustment layer just to where the boat is. So to start with, what I need to do is I need to lighten that. So I'm going to use a gamma slider in the middle of the layers level just to get that water matching as much as I can. If I go too far, then it gets too bright. So it doesn't matter about being absolutely spot on. Just it needs to be a little bit brighter because I've moved it closer to where the light source is. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to apply a layer mask on top of the boat, and then with black I'm going to paint the water out. Now I'm going to do it in a very rough kind of way for this video. You could spend a lot more time doing this and cut it out properly. Now it is important that we keep some of the reflection in the water so it feels like the boat actually belongs there. But I'm not going to spend loads of time on this. Now you might be able to tell that the water just does look slightly bluer because it was further away from where the sun was. So if I go back to my levels, and instead of RGB, I select blue, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a slight amount of yellow by moving the gamma slider in the middle to the right, and that just corrects that slightly too blue patch of water. Now if I zoom back out, there we go, let's just take a little bit more away, and I'm quite happy with that now at the moment. So the image is now come into Luminar NEO, and I'll talk you through some of the main edits that I do to photographs when I get them into this program. Now every photograph is slightly different, so you'll have to judge it based on the photograph itself, but I tend to go through this process with most images. Now the first thing that I use is the enhance accent, because this seems to do a massive amount of good to an image. It sort of improves the contrast and the vibrancy, and it just makes it so much stronger. You can't go too far. Somewhere halfway is usually it, but yes, again, it's do it by eye, feel what feels right. So somewhere around 50 works for this image. And this image also a bit of sky enhancement works as well, because it just takes a little bit that brightness out and improves the color as well. Then we don't really need to do much to the exposure in this image because we did that in Camera Raw, but should you need to do something, there is options there. Then I will go down, let's just show you the structure. I probably wouldn't do much with this anyway, but I'll demonstrate how we could do this. If we increase the structure, it's a bit it can make it seem very unnatural, but what you have got the option of doing is masking out certain areas. So if I just put a mask on the rocks in the foreground, that structure will only be applied to the rocks in the foreground, and then if you decide you've gone too far, you can just remove some of the effect. I will always tend to put a little bit of vignette on. And the rule with vignette is as soon as it starts to become really noticeable, like say that for instance, then you've gone miles too far. So a subtle vignette that you can't really notice is, in my opinion, it really improves the image. And then finally, what I would probably do is just add a little bit of mystical filter to it. It just adds a slight bit of glow and really makes it pop. Now, I will just show you something else that you can do in Luminar NEO. If I had decided to use the develop filter, then with this new version of Luminar NEO, as opposed to Luminar AI, we've now got layers ability, which is great. So if I wanted to darken the sky down, I don't actually, but just let's say that I did, then what I could do is let's darken the sky, but everything's darkened. So if I apply a linear gradient to the sky, then just the sky is darkened. But then if I click off that develop setting and go back to it, all of those settings have reset. So now I can lift the exposure thinking about the foreground, and then use the linear gradient on just the foreground. And now we've got two separate develop modules working in different areas. And if we go up to the edits tab at the top, I've got both of those two develop settings here. So we've got the sky, and that's a foreground one. So we could change the foreground if we wanted, or we could go to the develop setting underneath where we adjusted the sky. And so that's a great thing about Luminar NEO. It's working in layers, so it makes it really powerful. I've applied those settings, the image is back in Photoshop, and I'm going to call that one done. The next technique is quite quick and quite simple, but it's really effective for creating good photographs. So I'm going to show you how to create an HDR photograph. Now, when you're in location, you need to make sure that you take a range of photographs at different exposures so that you make sure that everything within the photograph is exposed correctly in at least one photograph. So normally you think of the brightest point, which is probably going to be the sky, and make sure that that's exposed correctly, and then the darkest point in the darkest shadows, and that's exposed, and in between you have a range of photographs, and then you use a piece of software to stitch all that together. Now Photoshop can do that, and there are third-party pieces of software as well that you can get. Now I use Aurora HDR by Skylum, just because I like it and I really enjoy the effects and the results that I get from it. So it's quite straightforward. Once the program is open, you just then open some images. So you need to note which images are at the beginning and at the end. Now I've got them open on a slightly different screen so I know what numbers they are. So those are the images that I want. I'm going to click open, and it will bring those images there onto the palette as such, so you can see the darkest one right up to the lightest one. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to auto align, which is quite important because when you're taking the photographs, the camera might have moved slightly, so that'll correct for anything like that. And you can also do what's called ghost reduction. So in this picture there were some flags that could have been flapping, so I don't want them to be blurred, so it should correct for that. And because I've also got some buildings against some bright skies, there's a chance of some chromatic aberration as well, so I'm going to tick that one, and then I will click Create HDR. Now it's just a case of waiting. It takes just over a minute, so I'm not going to sit here and talk while it does its job. I'll come back when it's finished. The image is now compiled, and we've got the full HDR on screen at the moment. You can see that it's really well exposed. I'm only going to lift the shadows at the moment at this stage, but you can see from this menu down here that there are lots of other options that I could do. I'm not going to go through them in this video because they're very similar to what I've already covered in Luminar NEO. And so in my workflow, probably what I would do is import this into Photoshop and then enhance it using Luminar NEO again. So I hope you found that video useful, and if there are any techniques that I've talked about that you'd like me to go into more detail on, leave me some kind of comment down below and I can look at doing another video in a little bit more depth. But in this kind of video, my main goal is to show you my process and just give you an overview, because different people will be interested in different kind of processes. So if you have enjoyed this video, do let me know down below in the comments, or nip over to my Instagram account, that's @DoakdenPhotography. Leave me your comments there, and you can also see lots of my photographs. Now if you like what I do on the channel and want to help support me to make future content like this, you can also visit my Teespring store. There I've got a range of merchandise on offer, so go and check that out because it really does help the channel. And don't forget the super thanks button as well. But you don't have to spend any money at all to support the channel. You can do that simply by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications, because that really helps me out and it makes sure that you don't miss out on any future content. Watch out for next week's video, that goes live on Sunday. In the meantime, go and check out this video just up here, but all that's left now is to say stay safe, and I'll see you soon.